At 3 in the morning on August 9th, the Secret Service man came into the room where the president and Dave Powers were catching some sleep. "Dave," the Secret Service man said, "the doctor has told me the baby has taken a turn for the worse." Dave woke Jack, and they went to Patrick's side. "I was with him at the hospital when he was holding Patrick's hand, and the nurse said, 'He's gone,'" Evelyn Lincoln said. And tears came into his eyes. I had never seen tears in his eyes before. Evelyn Lincoln had been his secretary for 12 years. She had never seen tears in his eyes before. Hello, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new, then welcome. I'm Jess, Connell, and I would love to earn your subscription today. We are in, I think, part 7 of our walkthrough where we are moving toward and we will move through the JFK assassination through a variety of literature. I was given an amazing amount of books, to be honest, by one particular man. And then also other people have just come out of the woodworks to say, "I have this book, would you like it? I can send you this one. I wrote a book." So people have contributed books, and I feel so blessed, and I also feel a great stewardship to bring you pieces, like the best parts of various books. And so by doing so, I'm hoping to kind of move sequentially through the JFK assassination through excellent books. The one we are on today is by a man named Edward Klein. He was actually personal friends with Jackie Kennedy, I believe in the 80s and 90s. And so a lot of this material he got firsthand, not only from her, but also as I read through, I just thought, wow, he talked to this person, he talked to that person. It's very well cited. And also he was very well connected. And so we are going to get into Jack and Jackie's relationship in the final months of his life. What was it like? A couple summers ago, we went through the book, Ask Not, the Kennedys and the Women They Destroyed. And throughout that book, she runs the thread of Jackie Kennedy, basically moving through and then recovering from her time as a Kennedy. And this last summer, we read The Kennedy Men and talked about, yes, these sexual exploits of Jack Kennedy. This book doesn't shy away from that, but we meet him at a moment when he had apparently decided to put away a particular romantic relationship. Now, does that mean that all of them were done? Does that mean he had no other trysts after this moment? I'm not alleging that. The book isn't alleging that. But what we're looking at is what was the nature of Jack and Jackie's relationship in the months preceding and at the time of his assassination. That's what we're looking at today. So as you can see, because this book is called All Too Human, the love story of Jack and Jackie Kennedy, of course, because we're nearing the end of their love story. This is near the end of this book. It's called Let's Twist Again, the chapter where we're going to start reading. And just so you know, when I do these readings, it is never the case that I read word for word every single thing in a chapter. What I'm doing is selecting some bits for our education and discussion. And I do want to point you to the actual book itself. There are always links in the show notes. So take a look at that for any of the books that we read from. That's always the case. Let's get going. It was snowing when Mary Pinchot Meyer, Ben Bradley's blonde sister-in-law, pulled her car to a stop in front of the White House. Mary rolled down the window and handed an engraved invitation to the guard. In late November 1962, the Kennedys were gearing up for re-election, and Bobby swept through the White House like an avenging angel, ridding the place of anything that smacked of foulness and corruption. Sam Giancana complained to a fellow mobster that the president was not paying him his due respect. "We broke our balls for him and gave him the election, and he gets his brother to hound us to death." To be sure, Jack might still indulge himself from time to time, but nude young women were no longer openly cavorting in the White House swimming pool. Well, there's a standard for us, isn't it? Oh, good grief. And when that's your low bar, it's not that hard to lift it a little bit. Movie stars were hard to find, and aides did not have to scour rooms in the family quarters for hairpins and other incriminating evidence before Jackie returned from her weekends away. Mary Meyer, however, had remained the president's regular mistress. In her early 40s, Mary was an attractive woman, years before she had lost a son in an automobile accident, a tragic event that had contributed to the breakup of her marriage to Cord Meyer, a pangendrum of the CIA. You need to know that Cord Meyer, her ex-husband, was, I believe, in the top 5 or so people in the CIA. He was a bigwig, for sure. And Jack is having an affair with his ex-wife. She dabbled in art and drugs, adopted the manners of a bohemian, and was a devotee of Timothy Leary, the LSD guru. She had known Jack since his student days at Choate. They had flirted and had started sleeping together in January 1962. Like many other women who had slept with Jack, Mary considered her affair with the president a feather in her cap. She boasted that she and Jack had smoked marijuana on more than one occasion in a White House bedroom, but it was not merely excitement. They were old friends, and as such, they were cozy with each other. Mary dropped the car off with a valet, and she and Blair entered the White House as her escort for the night. Mary disappeared in the middle of the party. "Since I came with her, I went looking for her," Blair said. Then, after about an hour, she turned up. It was wintertime and it was snowing, and her dress was wet and muddy. Her hair was bedraggled and looked wet. And I said, "Mary, what the hell? Where have you been?" And she said, "Oh, I just got a little upset and went out and walked around outside the White House." I later learned that the president had taken her upstairs and talked to her. That was the night Jack broke up with Mary. It was not as black and white as that, however. After that night, Jack and Mary continued to see each other, but more as friends than as lovers. We move to the next chapter. These are short chapters where he's giving us a move through of their relationship. "All I want for the nursery is a pair of curtains like John's room," Jackie wrote, ungrammatically, in a memo to J.B. West, the chief White House usher. She and Jack were expecting their third child in August. In May, Jackie departed with Caroline and John Jr. for the Cape, where Jack had rented a shingled house on Squaw Island, not far from the Kennedy family compound. By that point, there were 20 Kennedy grandchildren, 8 of them belonging to Bobby and Ethel, who was pregnant with her 9th child. And as far as Jackie was concerned, that was more Kennedys than she could handle. At 11:37 on August 7th, Jerry Bain, the Secret Service agent in charge of the White House detail, approached Evelyn Lincoln outside the Oval Office. "They called me from up at the Cape," he said, speaking in a low tone so that no one else could hear. "And they told me that Mrs. Kennedy was on her way to the Otis Air Force Base Hospital." "Did she say she wanted the president to know?" Evelyn asked. "No," Jerry said. Evelyn realized that something was terribly wrong. Jackie was not supposed to give birth for another 5 or 6 weeks, and she had planned to deliver her baby at Walter Reed Hospital in Washington. The secretary telephoned to the Kennedy's house on Squaw Island and got a member of the kitchen staff on the phone. "Why did she go to Otis?" she asked. "To have the baby, I guess," he said. While she was talking, Jack came into her office. Evelyn told the president, "Jerry tells me that Mrs. Kennedy is on her way to Otis." Jack was alarmed. He called Dr. Janet Travell, his personal physician, who was up on the Cape looking after Jackie. He phoned Larry Newman, an old neighbor in Hyannisport. "I want you to go over there and just sit in the lobby of the hospital until I get there." "I'll go right away," Newman said. Then he called Godfrey McHugh, his Air Force aide. "How long would it take to fly if I said I wanted to go somewhere?" 30 minutes, McHugh said. "I want to fly right now," Jack said, "so get ready." By then, Dr. Travell was back on the phone. She informed Jack that his wife was about to undergo a cesarean section at Otis. "That's it," said Jack. "We're going to Otis." Born 5.5 weeks early, the baby weighed 4 pounds 1 ounce. He was so sickly that a Catholic chaplain was summoned to come and baptize him while he lay in a pressurized incubator. He was named Patrick Bouvier Kennedy. Larry Newman was waiting when Jack arrived at Otis Air Force Base Hospital. He came over, shook hands, and said, "Thanks for being here. It made me feel so much better knowing you were here." "I've never seen him more emotional," Newman went on, and the way he said it, I was very close to tears, and I don't cry very easily. Later, Evelyn Lincoln found Jack sitting on a bed in a hospital room. He was staring into space. "How are things with little Patrick?" Evelyn asked. "He has a 50-50 chance," Jack replied. The tiny boy had trouble breathing. He was suffering from hyaline membrane disease, a respiratory disease in prematurely born infants. He was flown to Children's Hospital in Boston. Jack commuted by helicopter between Otis and Children's Hospital, where he donned a white surgical gown and cap and watched as his son fought for his life. At 3 a.m. on August 9th, the Secret Service man came into the room where the president and Dave Powers were catching some sleep. "Dave," the Secret Service man said, "the doctor has told me the baby has taken a turn for the worse." Dave woke Jack, and they went to Patrick's side. "I was with him at the hospital when he was holding Patrick's hand, and the nurse said, 'He's gone,'" Evelyn Lincoln said. And tears came into his eyes. I had never seen tears in his eyes before. Evelyn Lincoln had been his secretary for 12 years. She had never seen tears in his eyes before. She had known him longer than Jackie had known him. It's moving. "He just cried and cried and cried," Dave said. Patrick had lived less than 39 hours, and all Jack could say when it was over was, "It is against the laws of nature for parents to bury their children." Jackie was devastated, but she told Jack, "The one blow I could not bear would be to lose you." The house was full of sadness that weekend. One friend said it this way: Jack and Jackie were very close after Patrick's death. She hung on to him and he held her in his arms, something nobody ever saw at any other time because they were very private people. This was the August right before the assassination, and to all accounts, this one event seemed to mark a significant shift in their relationship. It brought emotion and closeness and empathy for one another in a way that they had never experienced before. That was the weekend that Jackie got a cable from Lee, her sister, inviting her to Greece to go on Onassis's yacht for a trip. If you aren't familiar with the story, you may remember the name Onassis from Jackie's future husband, Aristotle Onassis. But at this time, he was sort of courting and toying with the idea of her sister, Lee Radziwill. So Lee is inviting her to come to Greece on Onassis's yacht. And she and Jack were discussing whether she should go. Jackie didn't want to go back to Washington. The White House was not a real home to her, and at that time it would seem more like a prison. Besides, she just wanted to get away, so that weekend it was finally decided that she should go. Jackie had been on Aristotle Onassis's yacht before. Back in 1955, she and Jack had spent an afternoon on board the Christina, having cocktails with Winston Churchill. With its crew of 60, including 2 hairdressers and a Swedish masseuse, there was no other luxury yacht like it in the world. This time, she was ready for the over-the-top opulence, whereas before she had thought it was just gaudy and almost unbelievable. This time, however, she felt that the cruise would be an antidote for the pain and torment she still suffered over the loss of Patrick. Jackie had never even seen her infant son during his 3 days on Earth, and she had not been by Jack's side during the funeral. Just imagine that. Jack bore the weight of all of it. She was unconscious, and by the time she came to, her son had been flown to a different hospital. She never even got to see him. And then because of complications, she was still in the hospital when they buried him. So she didn't get to bury him. Everything changed in an instant for her. When she stepped aboard the Christina and joined her sister, Jackie was still in deep mourning. Life on board the Christina was casual, and guests did pretty much whatever they wanted, one observer wrote. Jackie at one point asked Ari to escort her in Istanbul when they went ashore, and he gladly did the honors. He showed her the Blue Mosque of Istanbul and his own private island of Scorpios. Jackie was excited by the superabundance she saw, and she was fascinated by Ari, who reminded her of her swarthy father. Remember, he's Black Jack Bouvier, a drunk, a womanizer, a man who I believe was unable even to walk her down the aisle. He certainly had a bender right before her wedding. I can't remember if he did walk her down the aisle, but not a remarkable man in terms of his personal character. So it ought to be a red flag to her that he reminds her of her father. Instead, as we know, the story ends with her marrying this man who she has this impression of. As Jackie knew, Lee, her sister, was in love with Ari and had petitioned the Vatican to annul her marriage to Stash, her first husband. She wanted to marry the Greek ship owner. As the Christina made its way across the Mediterranean, it began to dawn on Jackie that her sister might actually win this man and claim all this luxury for herself. As Mrs. Aristotle Onassis, Lee would become a richer and more resplendent queen than Jackie, who, after all, would one day have to vacate the White House. She began giving Ari the full Jackie treatment. She gazed at him adoringly, accompanied him to tea with Queen Frederica, and she swam with him in warm lagoons when the yacht anchored toward the end of the day. A paparazzo with a telescope lens caught Jackie in a bikini, and the shocking pictures of the president's wife were seen all over the world. Touring with her sister, Lee Radziwill, Mrs. Kennedy allows herself to be photographed in positions and poses which she would never permit in the United States, wrote UPI's respected White House bureau chief, Merriman Smith. The results at time are quite charming, but they serve to point up the fact that she's almost a different person when traveling, as it were, on her own. The others on board the Christina could not help but notice what was going on, and there were feverish conversations among the passengers, including Franklin D. Roosevelt Jr., who had been sent along by Jack to act as a chaperone. President Kennedy didn't like the image that was being presented, but Jackie appeared oblivious. When Jack called the yacht late at night, Jackie often wasn't there. At the end of the cruise, Ari presented Jackie with a diamond and ruby necklace and so many other gifts that Lee said, "I can't stand it." She felt that Jackie had co-opted Onassis on that cruise. Jackie had won the battle, but her victory was tinged with guilt. She had done everything but sleep with Ari, and a lot of people thought mistakenly that she had done that too. While Jackie was cruising aboard the Christina, Jack called a friend at Look magazine and asked him to come to the White House and shoot some pictures of John and Caroline. "I was surprised to get the call," Stanley said. "I knew that Jackie had been against me taking her kids' pictures for Look magazine, but Jack was getting ready for the presidential campaign and he felt differently. He knew the value of Look." Jack told Stanley, "Mrs. Kennedy is away, so now's the time to do some of those pictures you've been asking for John and Caroline." Later, I went over to the White House and gave him an advance copy of the magazine with my picture on the cover and the photo spreads inside. He looked through it and turned to me. "Well, Stanley, are you going to come to Dallas with me?" I said, "No, Mr. President, I have another story to do." And the president said, "Oh, Stanley, you'll have a lot more fun in Dallas." Little did any of them know what was coming for them in Dallas. Well, the last section we're going to read is called As Close as I've Ever Seen Them. If Jack loved the photographs of his children at the White House, he hated the ones of his wife in her bathing suit aboard the Christina. The images of a scantily clad Jackie were a political and personal embarrassment. For once, Jack was getting a taste of his own medicine. However, when Jackie returned, Jack did not say anything. Instead, he seized the opportunity to play on Jackie's guilt. "Maybe now you'll come with us to Texas next month." "Sure I will, Jack," she said. "I'll campaign with you wherever you want." Her doctors advised against it. They told her that it was still too soon after Patrick's death for the rigors of a campaign trip. But Jack insisted. The presidential election was only a year away. His popularity ratings were down, and he needed Texas to win. She had to make an appearance. "Okay, Jack," she said, "I'll go. What kind of weather is it going to be down there?" "Cool," he said. "They tell me it's going to be cool." So she packed heavy clothes. Jack emerged from his bedroom at 7:30 on the morning of November 21st and found Kenneth, Jackie's hairdresser, waiting in the hall of the family quarters. Jackie's maid came out and told Kenneth that Mrs. Kennedy was ready for him. He was ushered into her bedroom and began doing her hair for the trip to Texas. While he was putting the finishing touches on her hairdo, Jack came in. "Are you ready?" he asked. "The helicopter is here." There was none of the strain that I had sometimes seen between them before important state dinners and things like that. And I remember thinking, they look marvelously happy together, as happy and close as I've ever seen them. "We're really heading into nut country today," Jack said. It was November 22nd, and Jack was reading the Dallas Morning News. There was a full-page, black-bordered ad denouncing him for signing the nuclear test ban treaty. He handed the paper to Jackie. "Last night would have been a hell of a night to assassinate a president," he said, pacing back and forth in the hotel room where he was waiting for the motorcade that would take him through the heart of Texas, Dallas. "I mean it. There was the rain and the night, and we were all getting jostled. Suppose a man had a pistol in his briefcase. Then he could have dropped the gun in the briefcase and melted away in the crowd. Jackie, if somebody wanted to shoot me from a window with a rifle, nobody could stop it. So why worry about it?" It's hard to believe that he had this conversation, but this isn't the only account of it. I believe in the 6th floor depository, there's a quote from one of his aides citing this exact same topic. So I don't know if it was this exact same moment that he was overhearing or if Jack had it on his mind that morning and said it to multiple people. But on the morning of his assassination, credibly, he spoke about that very thing. Texas was a political snake pit. Part of the reason that Jack had gone there was to resolve a bitter dispute between the feuding factions of the state's Democratic Party, led by Vice President Lyndon Johnson. We read about that a couple of episodes ago when we went through a Texan Looks at Lyndon by J. Evans Haley. It was a great selection that gave us a look at the factions and problems existing within the Texas Democratic Party. Well, Jack had gone there to resolve a bitter dispute between the feuding factions of the state's Democratic Party, led by Vice President Lyndon Johnson, Governor John Connell, and Senator Ralph Yarborough. All three men would be in the motorcade that day. As a sign of solidarity, the three men had agreed to accompany the president wherever he went in their state. They had gone to several cities before they got to Dallas. They were in Fort Worth the morning of the assassination and flew into Love Field in Dallas, and then that's where the motorcade began. Jackie peered out the window and examined the sky. It was dark and threatening. It looked like rain. She had spent hours making herself ready, and she did not want to ruin her hairdo in a 45-minute ride in an open car. "Oh, I want the bubble top," she said. That is where we are going to leave it today. As I told you guys, we are moving toward the assassination, but I'm not going to tell the assassination through every single book we read. Instead, I'm trying to give pieces that we need to understand so that when we get to the actual moment of the assassination, we have the pieces in place to where we can comprehend what's happening and each assess for ourselves who is where, what's going on, what the various factions are doing, and why they might be doing it. And then hopefully we can each assess for ourselves. With this one, what I was hoping for and what I hope it did was tell us a little bit about the nature of their relationship. He had numerous adulterous affairs, and it had done damage to their marriage. However, she was hanging in there, and she was not reportedly having affairs of her own, although the situation with Onassis that summer was pretty scandalous. It scandalized him, it scandalized the nation. But then there's this issue of Patrick Bouvier Kennedy, their infant son who lived 39 hours. And I personally, my assessment of that moment is that for Jack, he had stored up a whole lot of grief since he was a young man. He had been away at war when his older brother was killed in a flight during World War II. While they were separate, his sister Kathleen Kennedy, was in an airplane crash in Europe, and he grieved in America. He did not go to that funeral. His sister Rosemary had a lobotomy and was never the same. He had many different griefs that had been suffered and that he had never properly mourned. My assessment, I'm not a clinical psychologist, so take it for what it is, but just as I look at his life, I think a dam broke at this moment. Everyone who knew him said that this was the most emotional they'd ever seen him. This was the most they'd ever seen him cry. And I think probably many different griefs came together and came out in that moment when he could finally mourn for this infant, this innocent, darling person who had held their hopes and dreams. It was a third child, a second son, so much joy and delight, to be snuffed out so soon. And to bear that alone, to recognize that his wife couldn't even be there with him, so much grief. And just like his friends said, people saw them leaning on each other in a way that they had never done before, the closest they'd ever been, that he held her in her arms. She hung on to him. So this moment with Onassis is an interesting interruption because she goes away to kind of just heal in privacy, have some sun, get away from the expectations, and ends up going down a path that didn't reflect her long-term aims and brought shame. But because she was in such grief, I think the nation still looked the other way and gave her a pass to a large degree. But Jack knew it could affect his re-election campaign if she didn't get back quick. So he goes and he gets the children in a photograph and urges her to come back. She does. And the very first public event is this trip to Texas. It's the first time they've gone out together since baby Patrick's death. Reportedly, they were getting along. Reportedly, it had been a beautiful trip. And of course, we know how it ends. But this is a little reading from All Too Human by Edward Klein. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's shorter than a lot of videos, but I hope that it gave you a good taste of the difficulty of their relationship in some aspects, as well as the emotional connection that they had in those last few months, and why that was so different and such a shift going into the trip in Dallas. I want to invite you to come back next time where we're going to be discussing this book, The Texas Connection, The Assassination of John F. Kennedy by Craig Zerbel. In this book, he goes through the reasons why people might believe that LBJ had foreknowledge of or was behind the assassination of JFK. We're going to look at that claim together in detail. Come back for that next time. See you soon. Have a great day. Bye.